What's up, everyone? Kyle here, also known as Shot in 321 on Instagram. I am an automotive photographer. Just got back from a Cars and Coffee here today. So, looking through some photos, editing some photos, and I figured I'd show you guys how I actually go through and select and edit my photos. So, I've already found a picture that I really like. The subject is framed well. There's just one problem. We're getting photobombed a little bit by this nice audio over here. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to fix that. So, in Lightroom, there's a nice tool called Generative AI that'll really help us get rid of this car. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to select the car and just the car here. And I find this tool to be extremely helpful. Sometimes it works really good, other times not so good. So, we'll see what results we get today. Cool. Right away, looks pretty good. We're going to leave it as is. After that, the first thing that I always like to do in all of my photos is go through and set my white balance. So I'm just going to select the little dropper and find a spot in the sky. Normally is where I go for clouds. It looks really nice and white. I'm thinking about here, and you'll see immediately our colors are fixed. Everything's looking much better. Luckily, shooting on a Canon camera, I don't have to do that much color grading. Sometimes I get lucky in a photo like this, and I'm really happy with where it's at to begin with, so I don't need to change anything. The next thing we're going to do is I want to point out to you guys something. No matter what lens you use, there's going to be some issues with the lens. If I zoom in on the headlights here, you'll see that there's a little bit of a purple tint right here. We're going to fix that. Luckily, Lightroom has lens profiles, and you can see it knows that some things are looking a little purple that probably shouldn't. So as I move this slider, you're going to notice that purple goes to white. So that's good. I don't see anything else. The image really isn't that noisy, but I'm going to do a little bit of luminance here just to make things look a little nicer. Nobody's ever going to zoom in that much in your photo, but really, once you get in photography and start editing photos, you're going to notice that, and it's really going to bug you. So the next thing we're going to do here is adjust the whole photo. We're going to put a bunch of masks on later. It's really important to make your subject pop and draw attention to your subject. So we're going to bring up the exposure just a tiny bit. It's a bright day. We don't need to bring it up too much. The highlights are going to come down because we have a ton of highlights. We're going to bring those shadows up. You're going to notice in the background here that everything's getting a little brighter. But what you'll notice is the parts of the image that were black are really dark, aren't really black anymore. So we're going to bring our blacks down to add that contrast back, bring it back to life a little bit. That looks really good to me. Bring the whites down a little bit. Again, it's a very sunny day, lots of white in the clouds, the poles, the headlights. And right now we're happy with that. So the next thing that we need to do is start our masking. So the first mask that I always like to start with is the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and click into our masks, click on sky. And it normally does a pretty good job. You can see here we got a little bit of his helmet. So we're going to subtract. We're going to do an object. I prefer to do the object over the brush. Sometimes the brush can look a little weird when you do the brush. You know, the edges are a lot harder to get straight. I'm going to select the whole helmet to be safe. Missed a little bit of the left. That's okay. We'll go back in. Now that's looking much better. His helmet isn't selected. All the sky is selected. The poles are left out. There is one tricky thing in this image to edit. And if you notice, there's some black netting behind the poles over there. So we have to figure out how to tackle those. And the easiest thing is to bring your blacks up. We're very lucky that the background is all blue and white. Nothing else in the sky is really going to be affected by this. So you can bring it up almost all the way and see that it doesn't really blow out the sky or change anything. It just makes this part of the image at the top right match the little bit on the left we have there. You could also crop this little bit on the left out, but I really like how it's already framed, so I really don't want to mess with that. The next thing I'm going to do is bring the exposure in the sky down just a touch. Add a little bit of contrast. I really want to bring those highlights up and bring those shadows down. And what you're going to notice is in the clouds, you're going to start to get more detail, a little bit more depth. And the whites we can make pop, make those clouds look really, really nice. One of my favorite things to do to give you that kind of deeper blue sky than you actually have is I love the dehaze slider. I'm going to slide this, go about here. And not only can you see that your sky is a much more beautiful blue, so at the top we have some clouds up here that we really couldn't see before. I'm going to give it just a touch of clarity. In fact, I don't really like it too much because you can start to see the net and some weirdness. So barely any clarity there. And I'm really happy with the way that the sky looks right now. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to select our subject. And normally Lightroom does a really good job with this. We may have to touch it up, we may not. But it looks like it's grabbed our bike, it's grabbed all the parts of the bike and our rider. So we've got no issues there. So what I'm going to do is zoom in so we can just pay a little more attention to what we're actually looking at here. First thing is you want to bump your exposure up a little bit. You want it to pop out of the rest of the image, but you don't want to blow it out, right? You go like this and bring it all the way up. All of a sudden it looks crazy. That's way too much. The hardest part in editing photos is finding the balance in between natural and popping and going way too overboard. I made a lot of mistakes when I first started, and that was one of the biggest things was I just went far too overboard. So you can see there's a lot of highlights in this bike. You've got the headlights, you've got a lot of white on this bike. So we're gonna bring those actually down just a little bit. We're not trying to lose all the detail and the contrast in the bike, but we really want to bring out some of the dark areas, like in between the headlights, behind the forks. So to do that, we're going to bring the shadows up. And what you're going to notice is we have a lot more detail now, but we're really losing some of the depth in the color, especially here on the black parts of the mirrors, on his shirt. So that's when we need to take the blacks and bring them back down a little bit and just find a natural point where we're not crushing it like this. That looks a little silly, but it's not unnatural. So I'm happy about there. I'm really liking where that's looking. And the cool thing in Lightroom is if you hold a little vertical line or the backslash key, you can see the original. So right now, here's where we were. And then it's going to take a second. And here's where we are now. Still looks natural, but he's definitely already popping out of the frame. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the whites down just a little bit. A little too much there. Just a little bit. Take these whites down, make them a little more natural. Deal with the headlights. I do like the little flares we're getting off the headlights there. I think they look cool, so I'm not going to mess with anything. Add a little bit of clarity. It's a tiny bit of dehaze. Tiny bit of sharpness. You really don't want to add too much. And we're way zoomed in on this right now. So again, these things that we're noticing, most people will never notice. Bring it back to fit to see the overall, and you can already see the image is really coming together. So this is the original. This is where we're at right now. Colors are much more vibrant, but everything still looks natural, which is the really important part. So the last thing that I like to do to bring more attention to the rider in the center of the screen is to add some linear gradients here. And we got really lucky because we're doing a bike, not a car. We don't really have to mess with the wheels or any significant parts of the car, but you'll notice if you're editing cars, especially ones with black wheels, you're going to want to select those wheels and edit them separately. So I want to bring this down to where it's kind of naturally blending in with the biker. Try to make it as even as possible. And then what we're going to do, we're going to drop the exposure. Again, this isn't this really strong vignetting, but it's drawing your eyes more towards the center of the image. The highlights down, shadows down more, whites down. We're going to move the blacks up just because this netting, it was starting to look a little weird with the netting. Wasn't happy with that. Tiny bit more clarity, tiny bit more dehaze, and we're going to turn the texture down. And that just kind of softens that top half of the image. You don't lose too much detail doing that, but it does soften it. And then if you guessed we were going to add a second one at the bottom, you guessed correct. So the linear gradients at the top and bottom are pretty standard for all automotive photography that I do. it's important that you kind of get your own look and do what you think looks good. There are a million people out there doing photography, especially of cars. So you have to kind of develop your own unique look so people can look at an image and realize who made it, right? That's kind of the goal. So we're going to increase the contrast a little bit, bring down the shadows, bring down the whites, bring down the highlights. We're basically bringing everything down, the blacks. And then again, that dehaze is really just going to kind of soften down here. And this is where I take out the most texture. You really don't want people paying too much attention to the road. So if I get rid of all the stuff in the sidebar, pull back, this is the original image. This is the finished product. Now, the most important part that I can't show you right now in this video is don't export it yet. Walk away, do something else, come back 5 minutes later and look at the photo. If you're still happy with the photo, then this is the photo for you. So once you're happy, you want to export it. If, like me, you're exporting to a screen, whether you're sending a client photos that you know they're going to view on their device, or if you're uploading to something like Instagram, TikTok, whatever you may be uploading to, you're going to want to use custom settings. And the reason for using these custom settings is you can do output sharpening. You can see here I have it set to screen and I have it standard. I don't have it too high, but this is going to make sure that you can select your quality. So if you're uploading to Instagram, there's certain dimensions you want to upload to so Instagram doesn't compress your file and murder it. But this one isn't going on Instagram right now. This is just an example, so I'm going to leave it as is. I have it sharpened to go on a screen. I have the amount set to standard. I'm really happy with that. So all I'm going to do is export the photo to the folder I like, and I'm done. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next one.